Picture the last Monday you'll ever have to go to work. Not a retirement party, not a gold watch, not a speech from a manager who barely knows your name. Just a Monday where you wake up, make coffee, and realise, for the first time in your adult life, that whether you get dressed and leave the house today is entirely, completely without any asterisk, your choice. Most people imagine that moment as something that happens in their mid-60s, if it happens at all. A reward at the end of a working life, handed to you by a pension system or a government programme, or a savings account that finally got large enough to justify stopping. But there's a small, quietly growing number of people for whom that Monday arrived much earlier. Not because they won anything, not because they inherited anything, because they calculated a specific number, a number that sounds large until you understand exactly how it works, put a plan in place to reach it, and then let the mathematics of compounding do what mathematics does when given enough time and left alone. That number has a name. It's called your dividend income threshold, and this video is about exactly what it is, exactly how to calculate yours, and exactly what it takes to get there, in a way that most financial content will never explain, because most financial content is trying to sell you something. And the honest version of this math doesn't require you to buy anything at all. Claire is 31 years old. She works as a project manager for a software company in Seattle, earns $84,000 a year, and has, until recently, thought about investing the way most people think about going to the dentist. Something she knows she should do, has been meaning to get around to, and has been indefinitely postponing in favour of things that feel more immediate. The thing that changed her thinking wasn't a book or a podcast or a financial advisor. It was a Saturday afternoon conversation with her uncle at a family barbecue. A man who retired at 52, lives in a modest house, drives a car nobody comments on, and has never, in Claire's adult memory, seemed stressed about money. She asked him directly how he did it. He told her two things. First, he lives on dividends. Income generated by companies he owns shares in, paid to him automatically every quarter, whether he does anything or not. Second, the number that made it possible wasn't as large as she'd assumed. It wasn't $10 million. It wasn't $5 million. The number that funds his life genuinely, completely, indefinitely is a figure she could reach in her own lifetime if she understood how the math worked and started now. She spent that evening doing the calculation for the first time. By midnight, she understood something about money that changed every financial decision she would make from that point forward. This is what she calculated. Before the math, a foundation, because the word dividend gets used in financial content constantly and understood correctly almost never. When you own a share of a company, you own a small piece of that company's actual business. Not a ticker symbol, not a line on a screen, a real fractional ownership stake in something that generates real revenue, employs real people, and produces real profit. Some companies take that profit and reinvest it entirely back into the business. Others take a portion of it and distribute it to their shareholders, the people who own pieces of the company. That distribution is a dividend. Here's what makes dividends fundamentally different from other investment returns. They don't require you to sell anything. A stock that doubles in value only produces money when you sell it. A dividend-paying stock produces money while you hold it, quarterly, reliably, in amounts that are announced in advance and paid whether the market went up or down that week. This distinction sounds simple. Its implications are enormous. Most people think of investment returns as something that exists on a screen, a number that goes up and down that you can only access by selling, that feels abstract until the day you actually convert it to cash. Dividends are different. They're cash arriving in your account on a schedule, the way a paycheck arrives, except the paycheck doesn't stop when you stop working, because you're not working for it. You own something that's working for you. Claire's uncle doesn't work. He owns pieces of companies that work, and those companies pay him for owning them. That's the entire model. It's simple enough to explain in 2 sentences, and powerful enough to fund a life indefinitely when the scale is right. Here's the first calculation Claire did that Saturday night. and it's the one that determines everything else. She wrote down her actual monthly expenses, not what she wished she spent, not an aspirational budget, the real number. Rent, groceries, transport, utilities, subscriptions, dining out, the occasional trip, the haircuts, the clothing, the phone bill, everything. She added it up. Her number, $4,200 a month, $50,400 a year. That number, her real, honest annual expense, is the target. Not $1 million, not financial freedom in the abstract. The specific annual income she needs to replace her paycheck entirely. $50,400. Now here's the second number she needed. What dividend yield she could realistically expect from a diversified portfolio of dividend-paying stocks. Not the highest-yielding speculative options. Those come with risks that make them unsuitable as a retirement foundation. A realistic, sustainable, diversified yield. The historical average for a portfolio of quality dividend-paying companies. The kind with decades of consistent payouts, regular increases, and businesses strong enough to survive recessions, sits between 3 and 4% annually. She used 3.5%. Conservative. Achievable. The kind of number that survives market cycles without requiring you to sell during downturns or chase yield in unstable companies. The math from there is straightforward. If her portfolio yields 3.5% annually and she needs $50,400 per year, the portfolio size she needs is $50,400 divided by 0.035, $1,440,000. She stared at that number for a while. She stared at that number for a few minutes. It felt enormous. It felt unreachable. It felt like the kind of number that exists in other people's lives and not hers. Then she did the second calculation, and the second calculation is where everything changed. $1,440,000 is a large number, but it's not a random, abstract large number. It's a specific target, and specific targets can be planned for in a way that abstract aspirations never can. Claire earns $84,000 a year. After tax, she takes home approximately $63,000. Her actual expenses are $50,400. That leaves a gap of $12,600 a year, $1,050 a month, that she could, in theory, invest. She hadn't been investing it. It had been going toward a slightly nicer apartment, a car lease, dinners she doesn't remember, and a vague sense of financial comfort that wasn't really comfort at all. Just the absence of a specific plan. She ran the projection using a realistic 8% average annual return on a diversified portfolio, the historical long-term average for a broad market index fund, $1,050 a month invested consistently, returning 8% annually. In 10 years, approximately $193,000. In 20 years, approximately $619,000. In 25 years, approximately $987,000. In 30 years, approximately $1,580,000. 30 years. She's 31. 30 years puts her at 61. 4 years earlier than the standard retirement age, on an income she generates entirely herself without depending on a pension, a government program, or anyone's decision about when she's allowed to stop. But then she looked at what happened if she increased the monthly contribution, not drastically, just by finding the money that was already disappearing into things she couldn't account for. $1,500 a month instead of $1,050 at the same 8%. In 25 years, $1,410,000. In 27 years, $1,620,000. 27 years. She'd be 58, still working by most people's standards, but at a point where the choice would be entirely hers. And then she did the calculation that genuinely surprised her. What if she didn't start from zero? Claire had $23,000 sitting in a savings account earning 4.2% interest, a good rate by current standards, but nothing like what compounding in the market would do with it over time. She moved it in her head, not yet, just hypothetically, into the investment portfolio. Starting with $23,000 instead of zero, adding $1,500 a month at 8% annually in 20 years, $1,140,000. In 23 years, $1,520,000. 23 years. She'd be 54. The $23,000 she'd been storing in a savings account, money she thought of as safely parked, doing its job, had just shaved 7 years off her timeline simply by being in a different place, doing different math. This is the number nobody tells you. The starting point matters enormously, but the consistency matters more. The person who starts with nothing and invests $1,500 a month for 30 years ends up in almost the same place as the person who starts with $50,000 and invests $800 a month for 30 years. The gap between I have nothing and I have something is smaller than it appears because compounding rewards time and consistency more than it rewards starting capital. Claire understood the math by midnight. She did not immediately start investing. She sat on the calculation for 6 weeks. Not because the numbers were unclear, because understanding what to do and actually doing it are separated by a gap that has nothing to do with information and everything to do with psychology. The gap has several components, and almost everyone who ever understood the math of dividend investing has encountered at least one of them. The first is what psychologists call hyperbolic discounting. The tendency for the human brain to value things available now far more heavily than things available in the future, even when the future thing is mathematically larger. $1,500 today, available for spending, feels more real than $1,500 invested, because the invested version produces a return that arrives in a future so distant it barely registers as real. The brain isn't being irrational. It evolved in an environment where a distant future was genuinely uncertain. The problem is that financial planning requires consistently overriding an instinct designed for a world where tomorrow might not come. The second is paralysis by complexity. The investment world produces an almost inexhaustible supply of options, opinions, strategies, and warnings. Enough that starting from scratch can feel like stepping into a room with 1,000 doors and no indication of which one to open. Most people facing this choose a door they already know. Savings account, keeping things as they are, waiting until they understand more. The waiting tends to be indefinite. The third is the scale of the number. $1,440,000 is a number that, for most people, has never existed in their lives in any form. Targeting it feels presumptuous, unrealistic, or simply abstract in a way that makes the first step, which is small and ordinary and available to almost anyone, feel disconnected from the goal it's moving toward. Claire overcame all three, not through willpower, through a specific shift in how she thought about the first step. Here's what Claire did not do. She did not open a brokerage account, deposit $1,500, buy a diversified dividend portfolio, and feel immediately confident and on track. Here's what she actually did. She opened the account. Just opened it. Deposited $200, an amount small enough that losing it entirely would not have changed her life, and bought a single share of a broad market dividend ETF she'd spent 2 evenings researching. 2 weeks later, she got a dividend payment. Not a large one, 47 cents deposited directly into her account from companies she owned fractional pieces of for doing nothing except owning them. 47 cents. And yet, the psychological effect of that 47 cents was disproportionate to its size in a way that Claire still struggles to fully explain. It was the first money she'd ever received that she hadn't worked for. The first income that arrived independently of how she'd spent the day, what mood she was in, whether she'd been productive or distracted or sick or well. It arrived because she owned something. And ownership, she understood for the first time, was a fundamentally different relationship with income than employment. She increased the contribution to $400 the following month, then $800, then, after restructuring 2 expenses she'd been meaning to address, $1,300. The account today holds $61,000 after 18 months of consistent contributions starting from $200 and a share price she doesn't remember exactly. The dividend income this quarter, $537, still a fraction of what she needs, but compounding in a direction that, for the first time in her financial life, has a specific destination rather than a vague aspiration. Not everyone starts at 31 with $23,000 in savings and $1,050 a month to invest. The math works differently at different starting points, and understanding which version of the calculation applies to your life is more useful than a single example. Path 1. You're early, you have time, you don't have much capital. This is the most powerful position, even though it rarely feels that way. Time is the variable that matters most in compound growth. A 22-year-old investing $500 a month for 40 years at 8% accumulates approximately $1,750,000, more than Claire's target, on an investment that, in monthly terms, costs less than most car payments. The early starter's advantage isn't capital, it's decades. Decades that once passed cannot be purchased at any price. Path 2. You're in the middle, 30s or 40s, some savings, moderate income. This is where most people find themselves, and it's also where most people give up before they calculate what's actually possible. At 35, investing $1,500 a month for 25 years reaches approximately $1,410,000. At 40, investing $2,000 a month for 20 years reaches approximately $1,178,000. Below the target, but with a starting capital that most 40-year-olds have available to supplement it. The middle path is not as clean as the early path, but it's not closed. The calculation just requires more inputs. Path 3. You're late, and the standard dividend threshold isn't achievable on your timeline. This is the path most financial content ignores because it doesn't lead to a triumphant conclusion. But it leads somewhere real, and real is more useful than triumphant. If you're 55 with $200,000 saved and 15 years until a conventional retirement age, the dividend math looks different, not as a complete replacement for other income, but as a supplement that significantly reduces what you need from other sources. $200,000 invested and growing for 15 years with consistent contributions can generate meaningful supplemental income at 65 that reduces the pressure on Social Security, pensions, or savings withdrawals. The destination isn't the same. The journey still matters. Here's the thing, Claire's uncle told her that she hadn't understood when he first said it, and only understood after doing the math herself. The companies that pay the most reliable, most sustainable dividends aren't usually the ones with the highest current yield. They're the ones that have been increasing their dividend consistently year after year, sometimes for decades, regardless of what the market was doing. There are companies that have increased their dividend payment every single year for 30, 40, sometimes 50 consecutive years. Through recessions, through market crashes, through pandemics. Companies that made a commitment to their shareholders in the form of a growing payment and kept that commitment through every economic condition the past half-century produced. These companies are called dividend aristocrats, and here's why they matter to the math. If Claire's portfolio yields 3.5% today, and the underlying companies grow their dividends by an average of 5% per year, a conservative estimate for quality dividend growers, then in 10 years her portfolio is yielding not 3.5% on her current investment, but closer to 5.7%. In 20 years, nearly 9.3% on the original investment. She doesn't need to buy more shares. The existing shares are paying more every year because the companies behind them are growing their profits and sharing that growth with their owners. This is the mechanism that transforms a 3.5% yield into a retirement income, not just through portfolio growth, but through the compounding of the dividend itself. The income grows while you sleep before you add another dollar because the businesses you own are generating more profit than they were last year. Claire's uncle is 59 now. He's been retired, living on dividends for 7 years. He still works. Not for money. He consults part-time on projects he finds interesting, at his own pace for clients he chooses, on a schedule that has never once made him set an alarm he didn't want to set. He earns additional income from this. He doesn't need it. He does it because the work itself is interesting when it's chosen rather than required. This is the thing most financial content about dividend investing never addresses. The goal isn't to stop doing anything. It's to make everything you do genuinely optional. The difference between a job you must do and work you choose to do is not a difference in activity. It's a difference in every aspect of how the activity feels, what it does to your sense of agency, and what it costs you psychologically to show up every day. Claire's uncle is not a person who did nothing after 52. He's a person for whom nothing became something he did entirely by choice. That distinction, optional versus required, is the actual thing that dividend income buys, not leisure, not luxury, not endless vacation, the right to make the next decision based entirely on what you want, rather than what you need to earn. That's worth calculating for. That's worth starting for, even on a Tuesday, even from zero, even when the number feels too large to be real. Claire is going to her uncle's barbecue again this summer. She's been going every year since she was a child. This time when someone asks him what he does and he gives the same vague answer he always gives. A bit of this, a bit of that. Nothing I have to do. She's going to understand it differently than she did before. Not as the answer of someone who got lucky or inherited something or made a brilliant bet at the right time. As the answer of someone who, at some point in his 30s, wrote down a number, a specific, calculated, honest number, figured out what it would take to reach it, and then made the same small, ordinary investment decision every month, for long enough that the math took over from the effort. The number is reachable. The math is real. The Monday where you wake up and going to work is a choice, not a requirement. That Monday exists for anyone willing to calculate where it is and start moving toward it. Most people never do the calculation. That's the only thing that separates them from the people who do. If this gave you a completely different way of thinking about investing and financial freedom, subscribe. New stories every week about money, choices, and the numbers that quietly change everything.